This video was made possible thanks to my amazing patrons at patreon.com/magicalhacker. If you're not a patron and you would like me to make a video for you each month using your decks, become a patron today. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Vault of the Archangel. This is the show where I do a top 10 list talking about cards I actually like from my decks, including new sets with new cards in there that are going to be added into my deck. So for today's episode, a little bit different. I've never done an episode like this, but I think it's super important because I was wrong, okay? It's hard for some people to admit, but I have no problems admitting when I'm wrong. I was completely wrong on this. There was a card from Kaldheim that I looked at, and I will definitely say I underestimated. I didn't see the full potential of the card. Let's go and talk about that card here. That's going to be Cosmic Intervention. 4 mana for an instant. We can foretell it for 2 mana, and then later on, at another turn, cast it for 2 mana. So essentially, it's still going to be 4 mana, but we can split it up 2 and 2. And it has this text. If a permanent you control would be put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, exile it instead, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And I kind of made an emphasis there because that's the key. That's what I didn't see when I first looked at this card. I didn't see the full potential. The person who brought this to my, for me to be able to see it is on Reddit, the user LifeNeutral. So LifeNeutral said, look, turn 1, you play any land. Turn 2, you play any land, and you foretell, exile the Cosmic Intervention. Turn 3, this is where it gets really interesting. If you cast the Cosmic for its foretell cost, and then play a fetch, and then crack a fetch, that fetch is going to the graveyard, so it's going to go ahead and use that replacement effect from Cosmic Intervention. It's going to go to your exile zone, because it's still your turn. It's going to go to the exile zone at the beginning of the next end step. You're going to go ahead and get that back onto the battlefield. So when you get to your end step, fetch land has come back. Consider yourself having ramped already once. You've gotten additional land. You've already cracked the fetch land to grab 1 land, but now you've gotten it back. So you've got 1 ramp off of this Cosmic Intervention, but that's just 4 mana. Not that great, really. So, what's the benefit here? Well, it's still technically your turn. Beginning of your end step, it's still your turn. Cosmic Intervention is still active and online. You can crack it again. It will go to the exile zone a second time because it's still under that replacement effect. Then it's going to come back at the beginning of the next end step, which is going to be during one of your opponent's turns. Obviously, you're going to be casting this. I mean, technically, I guess you could cast it on an opponent's turn and then crack the fetch on their turn, but might as well do it during your own turn. What's the difference there? But anyways, we've got this land entering a second time, so we've paid 4 mana, 2 mana on turn 2, 2 mana on turn 3, and we've gotten an additional 2 lands off of it by turn 4. So essentially, it's going to be like a 4 mana. A turn 3 way to get 2 extra lands out there, like a Worn Power Stone, but as a land. So really, really powerful for mono white. All you need is fetch lands, and all you need is just 1. You just need 1 fetch land. So if you're playing 6, if you're playing 9, those are going to be pretty good numbers for you to kind of aim for in order to have the fetch lands that you'll need in order to make sure that this ramp works. Okay, so now that we've talked about what Cosmic Intervention does, let's go and start talking about the decks that are going to be getting it and why. So the first deck here is Angus Mackenzie. Now this is my Bant-colored alternate win condition deck. So lots of ways that cards that say you win the game if, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have this, you win the game. A lot of things like that in this deck. And so a great place to put this card in here because we've got Cosmic Intervention. We're already playing 3 colors. We've already got the fetch lands, so we'll be dropping Sky Shroud Claim for it. Pretty simple. Sky Shroud Claim, also 4 mana, also gets us 2 lands, also gives them to us untapped. The difference here is Sky Shroud Claim can only grab us forests, and with Cosmic Intervention, it depends on what type of fetch land we have. If we have a Prismatic Vista or something, which is not in this deck, obviously, but, well, I guess that's not too obvious. But we've got some of the other fetch lands in here. We've got the Windswept Heath. We can grab forest. We can grab plains. So we can do a little bit of extra benefit here. But more importantly, Cosmic Intervention, because of the foretell, can work as early as on turn 3, giving us that mana already on turn 4, whereas on Sky Shroud Claim, we'd have to start casting it on turn 4. So that's the first deck I'll be adding it into. Second deck is Licho Sanguine Tribune. Now this is my Mardu-colored life gain attackers deck. Lots of big, flying, life-linking creatures. We've got red so we can double up the damage, give them double strike, things like that. We'll be adding the Cosmic Intervention into this deck as well. Dropping the Everflowing Chalice, also 4 mana, gives us 2 mana. It's a 4 MV card, but here we're going to be getting the 2 mana off of it. Yeah, Cosmic Intervention straight up better because we can use it in order to get lands, which is going to last a lot longer than an artifact. We can have colored mana. We can grab, we can kind of get some of those lands out of our deck, make it so that we're drawing better cards throughout the rest of the game. Although that's not the huge advantage, but it is still pretty cool. So Everflowing Chalice here being dropped for Licho Sanguine Tribune. Next up, we've got Nahiri the Lithmancer. And before I talk a little bit more about this one, this is my mono white equipment deck. And so you might be wondering to yourself, okay, we're playing mono white, but why would we play fetch lands, right? Up to this point, I haven't added fetch lands into Nahiri because there's no reason to. There's no benefit off of that, or at least not enough to warrant losing the 1 life in order to activate those fetch lands. It seems kind of, that 1 life seems more important than whatever benefit you're getting off of the fetch land itself in a deck that's not synergizing around it at all. But Nahiri the Lithomancer, with this ramp spell available, now there's a benefit to that. So what do we drop for these cards? Normally, fetch lands fill in the place of a color fixing land, but if we're not fixing colors because we have a monocolor deck, what do we add it into? Well, what about basics? It's important to run a lot of basics. I always talk about that. Having a lot of basics is very, very important because that's what's going to guarantee that you're not going to get blown out if somebody plays down a Blood Moon, a Back to Basics, or some other way to repeatedly destroy all non-basic lands. For example, someone could have a Ruination out there, and that would destroy all the non-basic lands, and you might be kind of hurting after that point. Whereas in a monocolor deck, we're not playing color fixing lands. Can we actually reduce some of those basics? Well, let's take a look. Ruination, is that going to affect fetch lands? Well, not really, because you're going to probably crack them in response to the Ruination. I don't really see a reason why a fetch land would be tapped and you wouldn't actually activate it while a Ruination is on the stack. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. What about Blood Moon? Well, having red mana instead of whatever mana we would need in a monocolor deck, in this case it'd be white, kind of seems a little bit rough. But there's a benefit. We actually don't have to worry about the color fixing that much because we're playing monocolored. So sure, we might be missing out on 1 or 2 white mana, but we've got so many other ways to produce white mana, not just from the rest of our basics and from some of the other fetch lands we might have cracked up to that point, but we've also got other things as well. So we might have some of the utility lands that produce white mana as well. So we've got Emiria, the Sky Rune, that's a great example. We might have the Windbrisk Heights in here as well. So a lot of different things you can use for white mana, even if they're not technically basics. And so when we've got that Blood Moon out there, sure, some of them will turn into red mana producers only, but we've got plenty of other basics that we should be fine. Again, we can probably just activate the fetch lands in response. Not really sure why we wouldn't. And then, of course, back to basics. That's really not going to affect fetch lands because they're going to enter untapped and you're going to tap them and sacrifice them to grab a basic in a deck like this. So it really feels like if you're using fetch lands in a monocolor deck, yeah, they kind of feel more like basics than they feel like utility lands or anything along those lines. So we will be dropping the Shield of Kaldra for the Cosmic Intervention. And here are the first 3 fetch lands we'll be adding in. Arid Mesa, Fabled Passage, and Flooded Strand. We'll be dropping Shield of Kaldra like we mentioned before, and 3 planes for these 3. In addition to that, we've got 3 more fetch lands we'd like to add in here. That's going to be Marsh Flats, Prismatic Vista, and Windswept Heath, dropping, again, 3 more planes. So that is Nahiri the Lithmancer. Next up, we've got Krav and Regna. Now, this is my Aristocrats deck. White and black, really great colors for Aristocrats. But yeah, sometimes you just want to have some more ramp, and that's what we're going to be having here with Cosmic Intervention. We'll be dropping the Sword of Feast and Famine. This is a card I used to think of as being really powerful because if you got any commander that's relatively cheap, or you've got a lot of cheap creatures like we have in this deck, turn 5, you get down the Sword of Feast and Famine and equip it, and you can attack it, untap all your lands. So it does pay for itself in terms of mana on the first turn, and then after that you can produce a lot more mana. However, this is what I found in a lot of games and a lot of situations. We would have that creature out there, we would play out the Sword of Feast and Famine, we would try to equip it, and in response, somebody would destroy it with some type of spell. And it would really feel bad. We wasted all our mana. We try to equip onto the Sword of Feast and Famine. We didn't get there. And maybe after that, we don't actually have a creature anymore. Maybe we don't have that cheap creature that we can use with the Sword of Feast and Famine. So it's like a ramp spell, but it is heavily reliant on having a creature for multiple turns. And so that kind of makes it a little rough. If someone can destroy it maybe the next turn after that, that's still pretty bad for us. So Sword of Feast and Famine, pretty good in some decks, but I think I went a little bit too crazy with it. It's not as good in every deck for ramp. So that's the way I see it here with Sword of Feast and Famine. Next up, we've got the Mida May, the Ageless deck. This is my infinite combo control deck. Classic type of, commander deck to have. Control combo. But we've got Mida May the Ageless, really good value here for a white-blue deck. We'll be adding in the Cosmic Intervention and dropping the Firemind Vessel. This is a card I actually wanted because it produces the colored mana. The colored mana is super important for this deck because there's not a whole lot of generic in our instance. So we want to make sure that we have as much colored mana as possible. Firemind Vessel, it does enter tapped, but I felt happy to have it since it produced colored mana. Cosmic Intervention, just a really great upgrade instead. Next up, we've got Bruce Tarl and Krav. This is my red, white, blue flicker deck. So we're using white and blue. Obviously, it can do a lot of flickering shenanigans, but then you get red, and you can have creatures to flicker, but more importantly, you get ways that red can use to make token copies of creatures. So that's essentially going to be flickering them as well. And as you can kind of imagine, there's a lot of accidental combos with cards that are just really good for this deck in red with white. So red and white together, I feel like are a really good combination for a flicker-based deck. Having blue in there allows you to flicker, I think, probably the two most important creatures to flicker in a deck like this. Mole Drifter and Cloud Blazer. Super important, I think, in a flicker deck. But we've got the Cosmic Intervention going in here. We'll be dropping the Sword of Feast and Famine. Same thing as we mentioned before. I was kind of wanting to equip it onto Bruce Tarl. We can make that extra mana, and we might not be able to use it, but hey, we might have some instant speed activations. We got some mana dumps in the deck that we can use. Obviously, the background here is the Eldrazi Displacer. We could use that for flickering something with the extra mana from double striking a Sword of Feast and Famine, but obviously, same problem lies here where we can maybe equip it onto our Bruce Tarl, somebody destroys it in response, now our Bruce Tarl goes back to the command zone, costs 6, and maybe we don't have enough mana to get that 6 drop out of our command zone, equip it onto the Sword of Feast and Famine, and actually start making ramp from that. So, very risky indeed for a deck like this. Next up, we've got Taneb the Harvester. This is one of my indestructible base decks. I had built this because I didn't really know what else to do with green, white, and black. Since then, I have decided that there's another color combination that I like more for an indestructible base deck. We'll talk about that in a second here. But I still got this deck. I think it's pretty cool, pretty neat. I am excited to be able to replace it with something that might be a little bit more unique among my decks. But we are going to be adding in the Cosmic Intervention and dropping the Great Henge. Now, the Great Henge, believe it or not, actually has a similar issue as Sword of Feast and Famine. The reason I'm playing the Great Henge here is because, hey, I've got a commander that can make it cost 6 less. That's great, right? Well, that means that the Great Henge will only be able to be acting as ramp once we get down our 6-drop commander. Having to wait until we get 6 mana to start ramping seems really rough. And so yeah, I don't think that's it's a great type of card in a deck like this. Great for card draw, but not for the ramp. So that's why I'll be dropping it here. Next up, we've got Darien, King of Keldor. Now, this is another mono-white deck. I like having 2 of each monocolor. And Darien, you know, such a interesting, such a cool commander. Excited to have that one. We'll be adding fetch lands into this one as well, because we didn't have him before. We will be having him now. We'll be adding in Cosmic Intervention, Arid Mesa, Fabled Passage, Floater Strand, and then we'll go to the next 3 fetch lands here on the next page. But we'll be dropping Everflowing Chalice, Plains, Plains, and Plains for the cards that you see here on this screen. Everflowing Chalice, again, same thing, 4 mana, 2 mana. It's costing 4 mana, it's producing 2 mana, but Cosmic Intervention is just so much better in so many different ways because we've got fetch lands in a deck like this. The last 3 fetch lands we'll be adding into Darien, King of Keldor are going to be Marsh Flats, Prismatic Vista, and Windswept Heath. Again, dropping 3 more planes for that one. Alright, last but certainly not least, we've got Tajik, Blade of the Legion. Now, this is my newest indestructible creature-based deck. And I certainly like this one a lot more than Tajik. I think red-white is certainly a much better color combination than green-white-black. And I think it's actually the best color combination for an indestructible base deck because you get Tajik as the commander. And I think that's a huge deal. If there were an indestructible commander and maybe a different color combination that had red and white together, maybe I'd be interested in that one. But for right now, I think Tajik is the very best commander for a deck based around indestructible creatures. We will be dropping a couple of cards in here. And part of the reason for that is because one of the cards we'll be dropping for the Cosmic Intervention is Sisay's Ring. This is a card, costs 4 mana, enters the battlefield untapped. We can tap it for 2 colorless. There's another card that does the exact same thing, Urgolem's Eye. That's in the deck as well. So I'd like to drop both of them. There's no reason to drop one and leave the other. It feels kind of, I don't know, I never like that asymmetry. So we'll be dropping both, but what can we add in here? And while I was looking at the deck and I was looking at previous decks, it dawned on me, we're dropping Sword of Feast and Famine from a lot of these decks because we're trying to put it onto creatures that may be pretty vulnerable to destruction. Our commander here is not. So putting Sword of Feast and Famine on Tajik, Blade of Legion seems like a fantastic idea. So we'll be adding in Cosmic Intervention, Sword of Feast and Famine, and a couple of fetch lands here, Arid Mesa and Bloodstained Mire. We'll be dropping Sisay's Ring, Urgolem's Eye, Battlefield Forge, and Boros Garrison. And you're kind of seeing here, we are adding fetch lands in here. Did we not have fetch lands in here before? Actually, no. So starting with Tajik, I had decided maybe it's better with my bicolored decks, any deck that's 2 colors. Maybe I don't need to play the fetch lands. Maybe I can play the other, color fixing lands in the colors. Tajik was kind of a nice experiment into that, and unfortunately, I feel like it's probably not a great idea. There's just not, there's enough color-fixing lands where you can play enough to have your colors, and you can have plenty of utility with them. They're going to work pretty great, but it's just not anywhere as powerful, I think, as a fetch land into an original duel or into a shock land. I apologize if you can hear any noise in the background. There's fireworks outside. What can I tell you? Hopefully you can't hear it on the recording, but I can hear it super loud here. So we've got Tajik. Those are some of the fetch lands we'll be adding in, replacing the color fixing lands. Some more color fixing lands that will be dropping here. We'll be adding in the Fabled Passage, Flooded Strand, Marsh Flats, and Prismatic Vista, dropping the Clifftop Retreat, Exotic Orchard, Inspiring Vantage, and Needle Verge Pathway. And then the last few here we'll be adding in are going to be Scalding Tarn, Windswept Heath, and Wooded Foothills, dropping the Reflecting Pool, Rugged Prairie, and Spectator Seating. So that is it for these decks. I'm excited to try Cosmic Intervention. Thank you again to LifeNeutral on Reddit, because that was just such a genius idea. And I can't say for sure whether it was your idea or whether you had gotten the idea from somebody else. So if somebody knows who was like the first person to recognize, you know, that you can do this in Commander, you can use fetch lands and get 2 mana off of this, let me know. I would love to sit down with them and say, you know, that's such a genius idea. How come I didn't see it? How come, you know, it's just not that obvious, but I think it's super interesting, super cool. Hopefully this might have changed your mind about Cosmic Intervention. I think it's really neat. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, tell me why. And I'll see you all next time. Stay awesome, everybody.